Good morning. I'm Marvin Hayes, and this is your GAR News Update. Today's top story comes from the Middle East, where Jerusalem has been in an uproar for the past month, with many wondering what has happened to one of the most famous individuals of our time. Bringing us up to the minute with the facts surrounding these events, we send you into the field with GAR News reporter and contributor, Lonnie Crossenberg. Lonnie?
Okay, Marv, thank you very much. This has been an unbelievable month here in Jerusalem. Instead of a Passover filled with praise, it was one of the most controversial in history. And now, as we approach Pentecost, the events of the past month or so have been truly extraordinary. The center of all the excitement has been a man some believe to be the Messiah, while others believe that he is simply an imposter seeking his 15 minutes of fame. This reporter has just completed an expose into this man and his life for you to decide. Most of you have heard much of a man named Jesus. He was born in Bethlehem, but raised in Nazareth. While we know little of his childhood, we know that for the past 3.5 years he has made quite a name for himself. Between his miracles, the authority with which he taught in the temple, and his own personal testimony, many have come to believe that he is indeed the Messiah that was promised so long ago. I have been following the events of the last month and have recorded many eyewitnesses of the events that made this Passover truly unique. Although they began over 40 days ago, they are still on the lips of almost everyone in the city. The events began with what can only be described as a riot, with the Sanhedrin sending quite a force to arrest Jesus. I have discovered an actual witness of those events. Peter, can you tell us exactly what happened?
Well, yes. We just finished our Passover celebration with a very special meal. This is when Jesus told us that he was the Messiah and that he had to die for us, and that 3 days later, he would rise from that grave. Even though he's our leader, he began the celebration with a demonstration of incredible humility. He washed our feet. I couldn't believe it. When we finished, we noticed that one of our group, Judas, had left. We thought to get more supplies for the supper. While there were several things that Jesus said that we did not understand at the time, we left the room in high spirits, singing and going to the garden to pray together. We had no idea what would happen soon after we arrived. It was so peaceful there that when Jesus went alone to pray, most of us, well, actually all of us, fell asleep. Jesus even had to wake us twice. Soon after the last time, we thought we heard the sound of a large group of people coming. Soon, we realized that it was the Sanhedrin police with a garrison of Roman guards. We immediately noticed that Judas was with them. Then he did something really strange. He came up to Jesus and kissed him. This must have been some kind of signal because the soldiers immediately arrested Jesus. Of course, I tried to defend him, but the only thing I accomplished was to cut off one of the soldiers' ears. Even though I did all I could do, they arrested Jesus and took him away. Can I add one more thing that I have to get off my chest that I'm still incredibly embarrassed about?
Well, sure, Peter.
I followed Jesus and the mob to the home of the high priest and was standing around one of those fires to warm myself. You remember that it was cold about that month ago. It was very tense, and I immediately realized it was very dangerous to be identified with Jesus. 3 times I was asked if I was one of his disciples, and I am heartbroken to say that each time I lied and said I did not know him. The last time I even cursed so they would not think I was one of his disciples. I immediately heard a rooster crow, and I remembered that Jesus had only hours before that I was going to deny him 3 times before the rooster would crow. I literally ran out, walling over what I had said and what I had done. I am so sorry.
Thank you, Peter. Well, there you have it. Christ or criminal? You decide. And now we have the honor of hearing exactly what went on in the very trial where Jesus was tried. Procurator Pilate has consented to give us an account of Jesus' testimony before him.
Well, it was very early in the day when I was summoned to this court. The Jewish leaders apparently had arrested Jesus because of some crime against their law. At first, I told them not to bother me and to deal with them themselves. Then they said something that got my attention. They told me that they wanted to execute him. Of course, this was not something that I could allow without at least knowing what was going on. So I consented to see Jesus. Then they said something that frightened me. They said that he claimed to be the Son of God. When I heard this, I immediately interviewed him and asked him if he was a king, and he gave me a strange answer. He said that his kingdom was not of this world. Is that strange? What? As I went between this Jesus and the religious leaders, I began to realize that even though I knew that Jesus was innocent of any crime, the leaders would not be satisfied unless I permitted Jesus to be crucified. I even had him beaten and scourged to try to get the people to feel sorry for him. I tried everything at my disposal to get them to agree to his release. Nothing worked. They even demanded that I release a murderer, Barabbas, instead. As I questioned Jesus, I began to realize that there was indeed something very special about him that suggested that he was indeed a god. I did all in my power to release him, but in the end, it was either him or a riot that would cost me my job. So I washed my hands of him, declared him to be innocent, and permitted him to be crucified. And one more thing. I'd heard of his claim to rise from the grave 3 days after his death, so I arranged for Roman soldiers to be stationed at that grave to make sure that none of his followers had the idea of arranging that miracle, if you know what I mean.
There you have it. The politician's priority. Keep the job no matter what the cost to anybody else. Was the prisoner the Prince of Peace or political pawn? You decide. We also had the privilege of getting a word from the high priest who actually interviewed Jesus on the night he was arrested. We'll have that interview right after this commercial break.
Thank you, Lonnie. It sounds astounding. We look forward to your continuing interviews after this word from our sponsor, the First Baptist Church of Lady Lake. We are now taking you back into the field for continuing coverage of breaking news in Jerusalem. Lonnie?
Oh, welcome back. Caiaphas is the high priest and leader of the Sanhedrin, along with Annas, his father-in-law. No nepotism here. Here is the interview with Caiaphas, the high priest of all Israel, who actually passed the execution order upon Jesus.
Thank you for letting me set the record straight and to get to the real issue about this imposter, Jesus. He was simply making too much trouble to continue to do the things that he did. When he first arrived on the scene, we tried to absorb him into the religious status quo, but he, like John before him, was just too radical. He was turning this great city upside down with his outlandish teachings and his tricks. Sure, he was a great speaker, but what he said was too dangerous to let it continue. Something had to be done, or the Roman government was going to come in and take control. I had decided that it was much more expedient for one man to die rather than for an entire city to suffer the consequences of his teachings. He simply had to die. The charges really were not important. We would have found something that would stick and execute him no matter what. One final thing that we asked of Pilate was for a garrison of Roman guards for the grave of this impostor. We had heard of a plot to steal his body and then claim that he had risen from the grave. That would make this whole matter much, much worse, and we just couldn't have that. So we asked Pilate to set a guard for 3 days after his death.
There you have it. A lot of concern for one they believed to be a liar. Was Jesus God or just a political scapegoat? You decide. As I investigated the route from the jail to the crucifixion site, a place called Golgotha, many gave conflicting accounts of who was actually carrying Jesus' cross. Many said that he was not able to carry it himself, and so the Romans commanded someone else to carry it. We are fortunate to have found that very person. Simon, can you tell us exactly what happened?
Yes, I had come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover like thousands of others, but I also had a special motive for coming. I had heard of Jesus and had talked with many who heard him and seen his miracles. I simply wanted to see for myself. To be honest, I pushed my way to the front of the crowd that had amassed along the way. I was surprised when a Roman guard grabbed me and demanded that I carry the cross all the way to Golgotha, but I had no choice. And when I saw him, he was so beaten and bloody that I could hardly believe that he was still alive.
Simon, I can see you were greatly moved by that gruesome sight. Thank you so much for your time. Well, the Roman military certainly played a significant part in the events that ended in the crucifixion of this man Jesus, whom some say is the Christ. One of them agreed to a short interview. We'll have that interview after a short commercial break.
Thank you, Lonnie. We look forward to hearing from someone who is actually at the tomb where this Jesus was buried. We are now taking you back into the field for continuing coverage of breaking news in Jerusalem. Lonnie?
Welcome back. This is one of the interviews that really set me back. This is a true hero, a soldier who was actually at the crucifixion site and saw it all. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Can you tell us just exactly what you personally saw?
Yes, it was my watch, so I received the prisoner from the Antonian jail. I led him to the execution site, and I've done this many times before, so it was really nothing new, nothing special, well, at first. I witnessed many prisoners be nailed to the crosses, and all of them, every one of them, have cried out for mercy or cursed and yelled profanities at their judges, but this was different. This Jesus had such a peace about him that it was impossible to miss. I've never seen a condemned man act the way he did. He winced in pain as we drove the spikes through his hands and feet, but there was no cry out for mercy or cries of profanity or cursing. As we watched the entire ordeal play out, the one conclusion that filled my heart was that this must be who he was. He was the Son of God.
Marv, the soldiers were not the only ones at the crucifixion who were impressed by Jesus. There were some of his true disciples who have agreed to tell us their story. Here is one of them who had a rather dubious beginning.
Hi, my name is Mary, and I'm from Magdala. I was there with Jesus' mother and the mother of two of Jesus' followers, James and John. We really did not care what they did to us. We just wanted to be with Mary as they murdered her son. I couldn't believe the wickedness of those religious leaders. There was nothing in their actions or in their hearts that even resembled God's love from His Word. Their hypocrisy was unbelievable. I'll never forget the contrast between Jesus and His love and the brutal hatred of those who convicted Him.
Thank you, Mary. It must have been truly horrendous. Thank you for your courage in coming forward. When we come back from a commercial break, we'll hear from one who actually touched the body of Jesus and buried him. Marv?
Thanks for doing an incredible job, Lonnie. After a word from our sponsors, we will continue to learn what really happened during these last 40 days. We are now taking you back into the field for continuing coverage of breaking news in Jerusalem. Lonnie?
But the crucifixion was just the beginning of an incredible story, one that I would find very difficult to believe were it not for the many eyewitness testimonies. By the time Jesus was removed from the cross, the Sabbath was getting very close, and then something very strange happened. One of the very group that condemned Jesus actually came out as one of his supporters and asked Pilate if he could have the body to bury before the Sabbath arrived. And Pilate gave him permission. This man's name was Joseph from Arimathea near Jerusalem. Joseph has agreed to speak to us in Jesus' behalf. Joseph, can you give us some of the details of that day?
Well, yes. But let me first say that I never voted to condemn Jesus. I was not even at the meeting of Sanhedrin when they did. I also want to publicly ask God to forgive me for hiding my true loyalty to Jesus because I was afraid to let others know. When I heard that Jesus had been crucified, I finally got the courage to be identified with him when I went to ask Pilate for his permission to bury Jesus' body. When he said I could, I got with Nicodemus and took him down from the cross, prepared his body for burial, and placed him in my own burial tomb. When we were done, we rolled a stone over the entrance so that no one or nothing could ever get in. We don't want anything to happen to dishonor him.
Thank you, Joseph. As a member of the body that pushed for his crucifixion, your story is truly incredible. Thank you for your courage. I had heard a rumor that the grave in which Jesus' body was placed is now empty, and that some of his followers had stolen it. I personally visited the grave where Joseph and Nicodemus had laid it, and it is indeed empty. As my investigation began to be made known, something amazing happened. In the past several hours, a witness has stepped forward on the condition that his identity remain anonymous. He says that he knows the soldiers who actually guarded the tomb. He says that he is part of a conspiracy surrounding the missing body of Jesus, whom some believe to be the Christ, the Messiah. Here is a recording of that interview. Sir, can you tell us about that amazing rumor?
You're sure that no one's going to know who I am? Okay. That my face and voice and everything, that you'll disguise it, right? Okay. So, well, I know several of the soldiers who were guarding the tomb where the prisoner was buried. And I know the story's gone out that they fell asleep and then Jesus' followers overpowered them and stole his body. But that's not what happened. The guards never slept. They're Roman guards, and they saw something they can't even explain. An earthquake shook the ground, and a great light suddenly surrounded them. They were so stunned that they couldn't even move. Then, out of that light, an angel appeared, rolled the stone away, and Jesus, he just simply stepped out of the grave. There was nothing those soldiers could do. And when they reported what had happened to the religious leaders, those leaders paid them a lot of money to say that the disciples had stole the body while they slept. And they needed a lot of money because, well, Roman soldiers who fail in their duty to guard, they're executed. But the religious leaders said that they would persuade the soldiers' commanders not to kill them. And that's why they had to pay them so much to take that chance. That's all I know.
There you have it. Was Jesus raised from the dead or just removed from the tomb? You decide. When we come back, we'll hear from a woman who made an amazing discovery. Marv?
After a word from our sponsors, we will continue to learn what really happened during these last 40 days. We are now taking you back into the field for continuing coverage of breaking news in Jerusalem. Lonnie?
Our next witness says that she and a group of women actually found the tomb was empty. Mary, can you tell us exactly what you saw?
Well, a few of us who knew and loved Jesus wanted to make sure that he was properly prepared for burial. So we went to the tomb before the break of day on Sunday. We were wondering how we'd be able to get into the grave, because we had heard that they had put a very large stone in the covering to cover up the entrance. But we just trusted that somehow we would be able to get in. Before we got there, the ground shook like an earthquake. It was very scary. Well, as we arrived, we saw that the stone had already been rolled away. So I ran back to find Jesus' followers to tell them. And Peter and John outran me back to the grave and found that it was indeed empty. At first, I could not believe my eyes. I was so stunned that when Peter and John went back home, I stayed just wondering what had happened. Then, with tears running down my face, I looked into the tomb and I saw two angels. They were incredible. One was at the head and the other was at the foot of where they had laid Jesus. They asked me why I was crying. And I told them because someone had stolen the body of my Lord. Then I turned and I saw someone that looked like a gardener. And I asked him if he knew where they had taken Jesus. The moment he said my name, I knew it was him. It was Jesus. He was alive. He had risen from the grave.
Thank you, Mary. It's clear that you were emotionally impressed by what you saw. Well, there you have it. Could the grave hold Jesus or not? You decide. Continuing with the eyewitness testimonies of the events after Jesus was crucified, we have an even more incredible witness who says that he too saw Jesus after he had been crucified and buried. Thomas, can you tell us what you saw?
I just want you to know that I was not with the other disciples when Jesus first appeared to them. In fact, I really did not believe that they were telling the truth. I told them that unless I actually touched his wounds and put my hand into his side, where the soldier had thrust a spear, I would never believe that Jesus was alive. Well, it was about a week later, and I was with the other disciples, and we were so afraid of being arrested that we locked the doors of the room where we were. And suddenly, there was Jesus in the room, and he looked straight at me as if he knew what I had said. And I was shocked when he spoke directly to me and told me to come to him. And though the wounds in his hands, and to put my hands into his side, I was so stunned that all I could say was, "My Lord and my God, he has risen from the grave. He is alive again."
There you have it, the resurrection, a fact or fairy tale. You decide.
Thanks for doing an incredible job, Lonnie. After a word from our sponsors, we will continue to learn what really happened during these last 40 days. We are now taking you back into the field for continuing coverage of breaking news in Jerusalem. Lonnie?
We now come to my last witness of the incredible events of the last 40 days. What you are about to hear sounds as incredible to this reporter as it will to you. However, there are many witnesses, and their stories are strangely similar. Can you tell us your name?
My name is James.
Thank you, James. Now, can you tell us exactly what you saw?
Sure, Jesus had spent many days teaching us of the coming kingdom. When we asked him if he was going to bring it now, he said that it was basically none of our business, but that God the Father had it under control. Jesus then told us to tell everyone we could about what he had done for us, and that he had risen from the grave. Then something incredible happened. He began to rise out of our sight and vanished into the clouds. When we could not see him any longer, two men in brilliant clothing appeared and asked why we were still looking into the sky. They told us that Jesus would return to us the very same way he left, in the clouds. But somehow, we knew that it would not be soon. We had a job to do, and all the power we needed to do it.
Well, there you have it. Could the grave hold Jesus or not? You decide.